One of the biggest retirement decisions that Kaiser employees face is whether to take the pension as a monthly paycheck or as a lump sum. And this is partly what makes retirement seem like a really scary thing because you have this big decision with the risk of making an irreversible mistake or the risk of leaving a lot of money on the table. Because once you make this decision, it's very difficult to undo. And there's the risk of living with the regret of making a mistake for a long time. A lot of people assume there's one smart answer, but there isn't. And the best choice depends on your situation. So as we go, I'll reference my Kaiser Pension Decision Checklist and a 15-minute pension fit call to help you pressure test your choice. Welcome back to the pod. My name is Barakat Khalili. I'm a financial planner, an independent financial planner based in the Sacramento area. And if we haven't met yet, I help Kaiser employees plan their retirement. Coming to you here from my home office in Rancho Cordova, where you might hear my kiddos screaming in the background. Just know that they're okay. In this episode, though, I'm going to walk you through two basic options to choose from, what the basic details on what you're facing, some common mistakes that I see people make, 5 factors to consider before making your decision, when the monthly paycheck option makes more sense versus when the lump sum amount makes more sense. And lastly, what do you need to do before making your decision? So first, you have the lump sum option where you receive a large amount up front. You can roll this over into an IRA, just like your 401k money. You control how it's invested and how it's with you don't have to pay taxes, by the way, when you do that rollover, at least for now, depending on your age. And you take on the responsibility and the risk of managing that. And of course, that is also going to be part of your estate. So whatever's left over at the end of your life gets passed on to your heirs. Now, with the annuity or the monthly paycheck option, you receive a monthly income stream for life. And this can create some predictability and peace of mind for a lot of folks. Depending on the election that you choose, especially of the many double life options, it can include survivor benefits and certain guarantees for a fixed period of time or for the remainder of your life and your spouse's life. And with this option, of course, you give up flexibility and control of the principal for that benefit I mentioned earlier of the predictability of that cash flow. So the real question here then isn't which one is better in general, but which one fits your retirement life better. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the mistakes that I often see people make. And the main point here is that people often compare the options a little too narrowly. So some common mistakes: only comparing total dollars, focusing only on market return assumptions. Another one is ignoring the spouse impact, especially when you look at your plan and say you're the employee and your spouse is going to be in a more vulnerable financial position should something happen to you first. Another common mistake is just ignoring the tax impact, ignoring your income needs, choosing based on fear alone, which is common. And I hear that a lot in my conversations with employees. And then lastly, choosing based on what a coworker did, especially when you don't know really all of the relevant details of their situation. Main takeaway from here is that this decision should not be made in isolation from the rest of your finances. It has to fit into your full retirement income plan. And you'll see how, as we go through this discussion, how this integrates with other aspects of your plan. Now, if you want to make sure that you're not missing the tax impact, the survivor impact, or overlooking your income needs, the checklist is going to walk you through each of those items. And you can click on the link there in the show notes and get your copy. So now let's dive into really the meat of this, which is the 5 factors that you want to evaluate before you make your decision. This is what's going to help you figure out which way to lean and what might be the better option for you. So for each factor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some questions for you to ask yourself and then some key points to keep in mind. So factor number 1, we're going to look at the need for guaranteed income. How much guaranteed income will you already have? Will Social Security and other pensions cover your basic expenses? Do you need this pension to create a floor under your retirement? That is a kind of floor layer of income. And a couple key points here to keep in mind is if you need dependable monthly income to cover core living expenses, this is where the monthly paycheck may be more attractive. If you already have strong guaranteed income, though, then the lump sum might be worth considering. And we'll revisit this a little later in the episode. Factor two has to do with your risk tolerance and your investment behavior. Yesterday, I was actually just speaking with a medical assistant who's about to turn 65 in a few months. She was thinking through this topic and picking the option between the lump sum or specifically focusing on the lump sum. And one of the concerns she raised is that she doesn't want to see the market drop and her lose all of her money. And she shared a couple of stories of family members who had gone through market downturns, seeing how they reacted to that. And I imagine you might have a similar situation and you want to avoid that because you saw what happened there with your family member, your friend, or your coworker. You're thinking, well, I don't want to go through that. So if you have that concern, just know that you're not alone. Now, some questions to consider to ask yourself. Are you truly comfortable managing your investments through market downturns? Will you panic if the market drops after retirement? And do you want responsibility for managing the withdrawals? These are questions that are going to be especially relevant if you're going to be managing the money yourself, as opposed to working with an advisor. Now, a couple key points here to keep in mind. The lump sum gives you more control, but there's also more market risk and behavioral risk that comes along with that option. And the monthly paycheck might be the better for option for people who just value simplicity and just want to sleep better with steady income. The lump sum may look attractive on paper, but only if you can live with the responsibility that comes with it. Or if you're willing to work with, a good advisor who's going to work with you and walk with you together on that journey. Now, factor three, we're going to talk about spouse and survivor protection. And this factor is obviously going to be most valuable and relevant for married couples. Here are the questions. Is your spouse depending on this income too? What happens if you die first? How important is it to provide lifetime income for a surviving spouse? So the key point here is that the pension election is not just about you, because survivor options can materially change the monthly amount, but may provide important protection. And this is probably a common reason that I see people, not just with Kaiser, but with in any field, in any company where the pension is benefit that's available, is that they're looking at those options primarily because they want to take care of spouse, especially if a spouse was not working or does not have maybe a sizable Social Security check to rely on. And so this is going to be a way to kind of provide a floor and a safety net for them. So for married couples, it's not an individual decision. This is a household decision. Now we come to factor four, which is going to be about flexibility, liquidity, and legacy goals. So it's going to be kind of like the opposite of the previous factor we talked about 2 factors ago. And the questions here are, do you want access to principal? Is leaving assets to your children, your heirs, important to you? And do you want more control over timing and withdrawals of the money from your own account? Key point here is that the lump sum usually gives more flexibility and potentially more legacy value, although that's a question of projection in the future. With the monthly paycheck, that income may die with you or be limited by the election structure. And so the important nuance here is that flexibility is valuable, but only if it actually improves the plan. And if these priorities are more valuable to you, the flexibility, the liquidity, the legacy goals, then that means that you're probably going to be leaning more towards that lump sum option. And finally, we come to the factor 5, where we talk about taxes and the overall plan design. Nearly every major financial decision you make is going to have a tax impact. And the tax impact here is also going to be connected to other parts of your financial plan that you may not be coordinating with the pension. And in particular, we're thinking here about your Social Security income. And when you turn that on, you also have your 401k, and you got some money there that you might roll over when you retire. And the other factor to consider there is that the IRS, when you turn When you get to your mid 70s, depending on how old you are right now and what the rules are currently, but at the time that I'm recording this, at least, the rule says that at 73, you have to start taking money out of your pre-tax accounts, those required minimum distributions. And so that's going to be coming down the pike for you, depending on your age and how far out that is. But that's going to be another factor that you want to consider along with this in terms of your tax planning. So here's some questions for you. How does this interact with Social Security? How will your tax picture look like in the first few retirement years? Will this affect Roth conversion opportunities? And how will required minimum distributions fit into the picture later, as I mentioned? The key point here is that the pension decision should be coordinated with your tax planning, with your IRA withdrawals, with your Roth conversions, with your Medicare premium planning, right? Especially, I'm seeing this a lot with single nurses or other employees where you have high income and you're in a bracket where you're going to be hit with those extra Medicare IRMA surcharges. And then lastly, overall retirement income sequencing. What money are you taking from which accounts and in what order? So sometimes the pension choice isn't just about the pension math. It's about what it does to the rest of your retirement strategy. If you got pension quotes and Social Security estimates handy, you can plug them into the Kaiser retirement calculator. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Feel free to also schedule a pension fit call with me where we can run those numbers and plug them in and see what works best for you. But you'll see the links for those in the show notes. Okay, so we wrapped up talking about the factors, and now I want to move over to talking about when either option makes more sense for you. And we'll start with the monthly paycheck. And when does that make more sense for your plan? This may be more attractive when, for example, you want a reliable monthly income. Your essential expenses need to be covered by guaranteed sources. You're more conservative. You don't want to manage the investments in retirement, especially on your own. The spousal income protection is a major goal and an important concern for you. And lastly, peace of mind matters more than flexibility for you. So as we kind of alluded to earlier, we're starting to kind of see what priorities are going to lean more towards that monthly paycheck option. So that's how you know when that's going to be the better route for you. Can think of a couple of conversations in the last week or so. I remember talking to one nurse who she was a single mom raising her kids on her own, and cash flow was really important to her. And as she's coming to retirement, she still has that wiring. Cash flow is really important to her. Now, the funny thing is she has enough money in her 401k and with the pension lump sum and with Social Security to take care of her. And she's not even spending $2,000 a month, but between Social Security and the pension, she'll have $10,000 a month coming in. And so there's plenty of surplus, plenty of gap, but that's what matters to her. You might be in a situation too where maybe you started late saving into your 401k, but you got a lot of time in service, you had good income, and so your pension, your monthly paycheck option is going to be really solid, and your income, or excuse me, your expenses, your household expenses are going to be fairly low enough that either with Social Security or even without, you have the opportunity here to really cover your expenses with guaranteed sources of income. And so you know that that's going to be coming in and you're going to have your expenses covered. And that's what matters to you. That's a good factor, a good reason to lean in that direction. So this doesn't mean that the monthly paycheck is always better, but it may be the better fit, especially if you value simplicity, predictability, and income security. Okay, so we talked about when the monthly paycheck makes more sense. Now let's talk about when the lump sum makes more sense. And it's going to be more attractive to you if you already have enough guaranteed income elsewhere. Your Social Security, for example, but especially between you and your spouse, is going to cover what you need. So, hey, we're all good there. The cash flow is going to look good. Expenses are low. Social Security is high enough, or maybe you have other income sources. Another factor is you want more control over your money. You value the liquidity and the flexibility. You have strong legacy goals. You're comfortable with investment risk, especially because you're either a savvy enough investor on your own, or you're going to be working with an advisor and you have a good advisor, you trust them, and they're going to be able to help you. And then lastly, you're coordinating the pension choice with a broader tax and withdrawal strategy. And you're really thinking through when to turn on these different benefits and take advantage of the tax rules and do some really good tax planning to really minimize how much you're paying in taxes over time and retire on a timeline that you control. Especially, this really kind of comes back to age and when you retire. What I see in practical experiences, especially if you're coming into your early 60s, you have just good amounts of Social Security, 401k, pension benefits, and you have a lot of flexibility and control over really how to stack and layer these. And you may be in a position where, especially, you have a lot of pre-tax money there. You can retire early, start to take money out of those pre-tax accounts, take the lump sum option, and start to do some strategic Roth conversions there to get ahead of, that RMD rule that's going to kick in later, but use that to retire earlier and be able to cover your needs, especially when you're looking at retiring before 65, and you can cover the medical expense coverages, pre-Medicare. You can then use that money to push off Social Security till a later date and maximize that income, and then switch where you're pulling your income from. So maybe in early years, you're going to pull more from those withdrawals, but then transition over to Social Security, be able to retire earlier, use that time when you're healthy and mobile to do the things that you want to do, travel, spend more time with family, do some fun stuff with them. So these are the kinds of scenarios that I've seen working with clients where they're taking advantage of the lump sum and really doing a lot of good stuff with that. So the lump sum can be powerful, but it works best when it's part of a disciplined and integrated overall strategy, not just a desire for control. And one other thing too I'll mention as well is, a lot of times I hear from Kaiser folks who say, no, that's my money. I want it. I want to pass that on to my kids. And because I know that, hey, when I die, that money is going to die or stay with Kaiser, and that's the end of the road for it. So I would rather take that money, give that to my kids, help them, build going forward. That's usually going to be a good indicator that the lump sum may make more sense for you. Okay, so we're kind of rounding it out and coming to the end here. I'm going to try to wrap up as soon as possible because I'm recording this on a Saturday morning, which means it's bath day for our kiddos, and it is going to be, well, it's going to sound like a torture chamber is going on in the background. So next, I want to talk about, hey, what do you need to do before you make your decisions? I'm going to give you a little bit of homework here. Good data makes for good decisions. And here's some things that you want to prepare to help you make your decision. I recommend that you want to take a look at your benefit summary, get an updated estimate. You want to take a look at those monthly paycheck options and what the current estimate is. Get a current estimate of your lump sum. Get a current estimate of your Social Security benefit. If you haven't already created a My Social Security account, highly recommend go on there, do that. Once you log in, you'll see a PDF there that you can download and gives you a lot of good info on that. Look up your current 401k or IRA balances, all of them, all your retirement accounts, both inside and outside of work. Get an estimate of your household expenses. What do you typically spend just on a monthly basis? Hopefully, if you need to write it out, depending on what system you use. I like to use the Monarch Money app, by the way. I'll just kind of throw that in there. It really gives me a good idea of what the trend data looks like and what kind of the average is of my spending. And so if you're looking for a good tool to manage your cash flow, I would recommend that. Don't have any affiliate link or whatever. It's just something I use. It's something worth checking out. You also want to look at your recent tax returns and then also get all the same data for your spouse too. So especially if they have a pension that they get at work or what their 401k have. And by the way, once you gather all these numbers, you can head over to the Kaiser Retirement Calculator. It's a resource I just created recently, and plug this in to get a rough estimate of what your income is going to look like when you retire. You can find it at calculator.retirefromkaiser.com. And you can also take a look at use the link in the show notes there to go over there and see what your numbers tell you. And this could be a really helpful way too, especially between running one scenario with the pension lump sum and run another scenario with the monthly paycheck and see what the difference is between those two. So once you got all that info together, what you then want to do next is evaluate your guaranteed income needs, evaluate your tax consequences, your survivor impact, your flexibility needs, and your healthcare timing, if applicable. Before you make your decision, pressure test the choice against your income, your taxes, your spouse protection, long-term retirement goals. One good way that you can pressure test this is looking at what happens if you retire earlier. In a previous video, I talked about the recent JP Morgan study that showed on average, people expect to retire at 65, but they on average tend to actually retire at age 62 and unplanned and unexpected. And this is for Americans in general, but I know with a lot of Kaiser employees, usually by default expecting to retire at 65. And so take a look at what your scenario looks like at that age and then see what does it look like at 62? Does that break your plan? Or, what would you need to adjust in order to keep it on track? Okay, we finally are making it to the end here. All of what we discussed is completely pointless and worthless if you do not make a decision. I am all about taking action and getting results. Here's your next step. If you're within the next 12 months or so of retiring, if you're looking, your time frame is the next 6 to 12 months, go ahead and download that Kaiser Pension Decision Checklist in the show notes. If you're looking to retire within the next 6 months, or you already have your estimates, go ahead and book a pension fit call, especially after you go to the Kaiser Retirement Calculator page. There's a button there where you can schedule a call with me. I'd be interested to hear your feedback and what your reaction was when you saw the numbers after you plugged in your numbers and saw the scenarios spit back out at you. So let me know. Feel free to reach out and we can run those numbers for your specific situation, talk through your specific priorities and concerns and goals, and then help, I think we'll get a good idea of which one of those options is probably going to be the right one for you. At the very least, we can run either scenario and say, here's what this looks like. And it's a kind of a choose your own adventure decision at that point. From this point, go ahead and also, if you're wondering, hey, where do I actually even begin this whole process? I hear a lot from folks who say that. I just don't even know where to start. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I should ask. I recorded a video here that walks you through that 90-day process of giving Kaiser a notice and then figuring out what steps to do, even starting before that point and in what order. And feel free to go ahead and check out that video.